Welcome to another edition of the Empower Hour. I'm Alfamar.
And I am Hanifa.
And we are your hosts each and every Wednesday, where we come to you with impactful topics of discussion that affect our everyday lives. This day is not any different than any other day on the Empower Hour, because we have some strong voices with us today to share their stories. In the studio is Johnathan Medlock.
Thank you so very much.
Welcome
Thank
so
you for
much.
having me. I appreciate being here and being able to talk about this subject that is like really near and dear to me. So I definitely appreciate being invited. Based on our conversation last week,
Yes.
so it was, this is meant to be.
Yeah.
And hopefully later on we can get Natasha back online and really talk about the subject that we're all here to hear.
Yes, which is mental health, the impact of mental health on our relationships. And Natasha, Pierre, we're hoping will be joining us. We had her on and fine in the background, and then something blanked out, and so we're trying to get her back. She's not here in the studio, but she's in Florida, correct?
She's in Florida.
She's in Florida, so we're attempting to get her on a split screen for you guys, so bear with us.
So we're currently working on that. And so while we, work that out, we just kind of wanted to go ahead and start with
Absolutely.
Johnathan. You're no stranger to this show, but for those who do not know you, Johnathan, your name is Johnathan Medlock.
Yes.
Just a little introduction as who you are to the audience. You've held 4 public offices in less time than the full term for any one of those positions.
Yes.
He is currently the acting mayor of the city of the District Heights, Maryland, and the vice chair of the Prince George's County, Maryland Human Relations Commission. He's been the vice mayor of the city and a commissioner in the city as well. He is a champion of mental health. This is what we're here about. He's a champion of mental health education and awareness, and is working to bring mental health collaborative to Prince George's County. I appreciate your work. Thank you, and
Thank
welcome
you so
again.
Much. Thank you so very
Yes.
much. That is the reason why I'm here. Working with the county on mental health. I'm working on the Prince George's County Mental Health Collaborative. And why am I doing that? Because it's extremely important that we have the conversation about mental health and mental wellness. Mental health is health also. So we want to continue to talk about that. It's one of those things in our family, in African American families, that we don't talk about. They're so taboo, and we let it go to the wayside and not really have the real conversation. And one of the biggest things that I focus on at this current time is depression, anxiety and panic disorders, and bipolar disorders. So that is one of the things that we have been focusing on. I'll have the mental health collaborative put in place within the next, hopefully the next 3 weeks. So it's exciting work. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you share with us how do you fit into this equation? Do you yourself suffer from mental health issues, or?
That's a great question. And the honest answer is I've suffered with anxiety and panic disorders some years back. I remember one day just doing so much. I think at that time I was training for a marathon. I had 2 jobs. I was dealing with a lot of grief and loss in my family. And all of a sudden I'm in the bed and I wake up in a panic and didn't know what it was. And for a while, I just thought I was losing my mind, until I did the wise thing and I sought some counseling. And there we go, diagnosed with that panic disorder, anxiety, and I decided to do something about it. I kept the conversation open. I had the conversation with anybody I could. I wasn't threatened by the fact that I had panic disorders or anxiety disorder, because I was still viewed as someone who was strong and doing so many great things, and so it didn't diminish my strength.
Right.
So I began to start talking about it. I said, even me too.
Right.
I also have gone through. So it made me more empathetic to any of those who I looked at from abroad and said, you know what, I'm not going to judge, because I've done that. I've been through that same situation. And Alkamar, one of the things, a person who's dealt with anxiety and panic disorders, can tell when somebody else is going through it. So you can't hide it. It's not that easy anymore because I can identify it, because I can see it in myself. I saw it in myself. So it took a while, but I got past that. But it took a lot of effort and some committed people to me to help me get past that situation.
Well, I think we have Tasha on board with us, so we're going to pull her into the conversation.
Yes.
Tasha, are you there? There she is. Hi, Miss Tasha. Miss Natasha Pierre.
Hey, Natasha.
How are you?
Okay.
Hi,
How are
welcome.
you?
Well, Hanifa's going to share.
So we have Natasha, and again, if you want to see Natasha, you will go to the eLife Media group page on the Facebook. But we do have Natasha live here on the screen. So just to tell you a little bit about Natasha, Natasha Pierre is a mental health educator, activist, and combat veteran advocate. She is currently the Vice President of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Hillsborough County. She is an award-winning speaker and the author of Provoking Thoughts, 101 Quotes for Daily Living, which was published in February 2018. Natasha, we welcome you to the program, and we're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Natasha, and this is going to be a very interesting discussion because you two have history. And, yes. But before we get started in that history, can you share with us how do you fit, the same question, how do you fit into this discussion as far as mental health is concerned? You personally, do you suffer from mental health issues?
Yeah, this is my life. This is my journey. Much of what I do, I've always said that I speak and write about things that I have lived, and I have my own 20-year mental health journey. The diagnosis that I was given was bipolar type 2 ultradian, which basically means rapid cycling. So I could go between depression and hypomania several times in a day, which you can imagine is very, very exhausting. PTSD, generalized anxiety, and EDNOS, which is an eating disorder not otherwise specified. And over the last year, and I want to back up a little bit and say that this conversation, the conversation that Johnathan and I are having with you today, it's actually 7 years in the making. I think that I can speak for both of us when I say that probably from our first conversation, we know that we were going to be connected for purpose in one way or another. We didn't necessarily know it would have been this, but today's conversation is something that we've spoken about several times over the last several years. And as I've become more public with sharing my journey, part of that is relationships. I wouldn't be authentic if I shared only certain parts of my story and not others. So the time is now.
Absolutely.
Ashe. So, can you guys share with us some of the challenges that you come across when in dealing with these issues in a relationship setting? Johnathan?
Absolutely. Some of the problems is the deciding what you're going to sacrifice. And I think when you say you love someone, when you truly love someone, there's no measure of sacrifice that you're willing to give. When Natasha and I met, thank you, Alkamar, we met these 7 years ago, and we began to have a relationship of conversation. And that conversation, for hours, of course, and that built on to how I cared about her. And from that, I began to love her. So it's what am I willing to sacrifice? And I was willing to sacrifice everything for that relationship, i.e. for her. And I knew, I think, Natasha, from the beginning, I understood and knew what was going on at a certain point in time. So it was a journey.
You say you knew from the beginning?
Prior
to her telling you anything?
As we began to talk, we connected on a spiritual level more so. Let's say that our spirits connected. We connected through, like I said, conversation, and we built off that.
Okay.
And when she exclaimed that to me and let me know what was going on, it was, oh, okay, let's go. You know, and it wasn't a runaway.
Yeah.
Can you agree with that, Natasha?
Absolutely. I think, what we did well is the way that we connected. First of all, for me, at that point, I was in a place where anyone who was going to be in my life, I was going to be honest and transparent about what my struggles and what my challenges were. So very early on, probably within a month, maybe within a couple weeks, I shared my diagnoses with Johnathan. And I think that's something that we all should, anyone with a diagnosis, physical, mental, or other, should be comfortable sharing what they're dealing with, and to give the other person a choice of whether or not they want to stay and remain by your side and support you through whatever happens and whatever comes. And so with Johnathan and I, we connected on a spiritual level. I shared what my diagnoses were, and he remained.
Now, I'm curious, how does people normally respond, Natasha, to you when you share the information that you have bipolar disorder?
So, first, now, people aren't expecting me to show up when they're talking about mental illness and mental health.
Right.
Many people have the stereotype and the stigma that a person with any mental illness is in a corner drooling and speaking to themselves and, acting crazy and erratically. And that's why I am speaking, because no one is expecting me to show up and to share my story and my journey. The reality is, for many people who are living with a mental illness, they don't have the support that I had the benefit of having. In addition to Johnathan, I have a close group of friends who have been supportive from day one. And typically when you hear that someone has a mental illness, there's an asterisk by their name. There's an asterisk by their face, and people are waiting to see what type of behavior, how they will respond, and they're just not getting the support. I mean, just from December 1st alone until now, I've received so many messages from people who are feeling hopeless and who are lonely and isolated because they don't have the type of people in their lives that can truly support them through this journey.
One of the things too is I was heavily involved and engaged in trying to figure out. Once I figured out that I did care and love for Natasha, and she let me know what was going on, my job at that point was to find out as much as possible about her mental illness, her condition, so I could learn to be supportive. So to be very honest, I bought the DSM 3, 4, and 5. Learned her of the bipolar disorder 2, mixed states and rapid cycling and PTSD. I learned this with the DSM, which are very costly. The diagnostic
and statistical manual.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a manual for
professionals,
for psychotic review. So understanding that, and I think the DSM-5 is the latest version, but I did that in order to understand what she was going through, so I could be there and support her. This journey wasn't easy because my feelings got hurt a lot. I dealt with a lot of ups and downs and trials and tribulations. We had breakups and put back togethers and everything else, but I committed myself to loving her, not just what she could provide for me, but the who she was, just period. So I've seen her cute side, and I've seen the worst part I can possibly see. But at the end of the day, 7-year journey, she's still here, and we're still talking. So that has to speak for something.
It does speak for a lot.
When you speak about support, Johnathan, I think there's a lot of people who think that they support and who think that they love, but their actions and their effort does not indicate that.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that Johnathan did is he became a subject matter expert on my diagnosis, not just the diagnosis, but how the diagnosis affected me. So that meant purchasing all the manuals to understand it from a clinical perspective, but also observing, watching, interacting, listening, speaking to me. One of the things that we did for years with our conversations is whenever we would speak, and it's important to note that Johnathan and I have never lived in the same place. You know, shortly after we met, I moved to Tampa. So we've never lived in the same place. So a lot of the support that I received and the foundation of what we have today was built long distance. Our calls would begin with him asking me, "What's your number?" And for me, for us, that meant, okay, where are you on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being that you are suicidal, and 10 means you're absolutely irritable and, you know, you want to burn something down. Where are you on that spectrum? So his understanding of the diagnosis and his observations of me, I could then say, okay, today I'm a 5. Great. So he knows how to engage me at that time. Or I'll say I'm a 3. So he knows what to say, you know, go through the checklist. Okay, did you take medicine? You know, what's going on? What's happening? But that's not something that he would have been able to navigate, first, without me disclosing the diagnosis, and second, without him doing the work on his own to ensure that he understood how to support me. And even for me, I had to, there's some personal responsibility with all of this, where I had to be able to communicate with him. And Johnathan, I'll let you talk about sound and the difference between hearing me and listening to me.
Absolutely. No, that is very true. The vast distances, over 1,000 miles relationship that we had, it was contingent upon me really listening to her. And listening to me and to us was a vibration. So when I asked her how she was doing, I could hear in her voice, I could feel in her voice where she was. So if she said I was a 5, and I know, you know, you sound like a 7, you know what I'm saying? I'm generally right. Or if she's a 3, I can hear that. And by knowing that she's a 3 and she's on the depressive side, I know how to act and respond. You know, I know what to say and what not to say, and what trigger words would cause her to feel a certain way. So it's really balancing out and being able to feel her and not just hear her,
Right.
which is a major difference. Because like I said, that those sounds she made, I was able to cue in and really adjust accordingly. And it was, and we still do that to this day.
So my question is, Natasha, to you first. How early were you able to know that something was different about you, and able to be able to go and address it and then be diagnosed? Because I'm listening to you guys, and you just explained, just telling Johnathan up front, you know, that helps. But I'm thinking about so many people who who are not diagnosed, but they know something is different and it's affecting their relationships, but they have not been able to kind of put any like title to it. So how early did you know, and what got you to the point of getting that information or being diagnosed?
So there have been several iterations of my mental health journey. In hindsight, I know that I have dealt with depression from as early as age 9, because I found poems that I wrote at that age. I then had significant challenges in 2001. After 9/11, I was living in New York, and shortly after, I was fainting all over New York City. And after being cleared by several physical doctors, there's nothing wrong with my heart, lungs, etc., I went to a psychiatrist. And that's when I was told that I was dealing with some survivor's guilt, because I was supposed to be at the World Trade Center that day, but also PTSD. I think it's important to know that in my original diagnosis, generalized anxiety was not a part of it. When Johnathan and I met January 2013, I moved to Tampa February 2013, and we had our long distance relationship. I was coming back and forth, but understand that I've never lived in Tampa. So I came to a new state, new city, new people, new environment, new everything. And shortly thereafter, I began to feel, I mean, the only thing I could call it was weird. And, you know, I was telling Johnathan about it, and he was actually the one who told me that I think you're dealing with some anxiety. I think you're having panic attacks. You need to go and get checked. So in this last 7 years of my life, Johnathan was at the beginning of this iteration, of this phase of my journey, where I was able to seek help and seek the treatment that I needed to deal with panic attacks because they were debilitating. It was hard for me to drive over bridges, challenging to be in parking garages, to be in stores where I was unfamiliar, the fainting return. I lived with almost a perpetual daily state of fight or flight constantly. And so Johnathan, because of what he had experienced in his life, he recognized what I was going through and told me, you need to get that checked out. So it's been a journey. You know, what I'm seeing in my work is that there are children as young as 5 and 6 that are dealing with anxiety. I'm seeing children with mood disorders as young as 11 and 12. It's unfortunately getting younger.
Yeah.
For me, in hindsight, I would say age 9 was when I began to notice some differences in me. But it wasn't until I got to adulthood that I was really empowered to really seek help and treatment and to really create a recovery strategy that works for me. And I'm helping other people to do the same.
Absolutely. Natasha, you know, if I can,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, in some of those times when you were going through these situations, I think you can remember times where you were about to go over a bridge and feeling that anxiety, and I called, or you were about to go in underneath a tunnel or what have you, and I called, and because of the connection.
Yes.
And even I think we can say true love has no distance. You know. So when you were going through, I was there to help and assist, just through my words and through the comforting and through comfort. And I think people would probably ask me the question, why did you stay? This chick has bipolar disorder. Why are you there?
I was going to ask that too.
No, and my simple answer, because she was worth it. Because I had a chance to know Natasha way before any the stated diagnoses. So I knew her heart, I knew her brilliance. She's absolutely brilliant. Not only so, and I can say that because I didn't give Natasha, when she was my strategist and my political analyst and all these things, I didn't give her bipolar assignments. I gave her assignments that were worthy of her skills and ability and where I wanted to see her. So she helped me navigate these things, and to be very honest, it would be hard pressed for me to say that I would be where I am if it wasn't because of the symbiotic relationship that Natasha and I had and have currently, because we help each other. Are you going to talk about the book really quick?
Well, we're going to get into
Okay,
the book
we'll get that.
a little later. But I did want to touch bases about something that you said, Johnathan. Well, Natasha, because she is brilliant, I've seen her brilliance firsthand in her in action. You know, she does public speaking, a myriad of different things. She's an extremely talented woman. How do you do that, though? How do you navigate a successful career and lifestyle with bipolar and dealing with bipolar? And you too, Johnathan, and your issue, because you yourself are a success in and of yourself as well. But Tasha, let her start first.
Great question. And this is why I do what I do. Because I want to shatter all of the harmful and negative stereotypes and myths surrounding people who are living with a mental illness or mental health diagnosis. It is very possible for you to be professionally capable, for you to be a political strategist and a publicist and marketing and everything to an elected official, and personally be cycling through depression and mania and suicidal thoughts and worthlessness, etc. It's very possible. And so it's important to, Johnathan and I speak a lot about personal responsibility. We would not be where we are today if I didn't do what was necessary for me to understand the diagnosis and how it affected me. Many times people think, okay, I have a diagnosis, the world is supposed to conform to me. That's not going to happen. And the patient part of Johnathan, the patient part of caregivers, is waiting for the individual, waiting for me to be able to articulate first to myself and then to be able to articulate to you. There are times when, Johnathan knew my number, but I couldn't articulate why I felt the way I felt. Even recently, things were going, November was an amazing year for me, month, as far as TV appearances, etc. And there was one day I was telling Johnathan, I was like, everything is going amazingly well, but I'm still, depressed. And so life doesn't stop just because you have a mood disorder. In the same way that a person who has diabetes must still take insulin, someone with asthma still uses their inhaler, life goes on. And what happens is you learn how to better manage symptoms and better navigate your life, and even be able to better articulate to your supports how they're able to support you. So for me, do I still have symptoms? Absolutely. Do I still have suicidal thoughts? Absolutely. Do I still feel fluctuations in my mood? Daily. Do I still have anxiety? Absolutely. But I have learned strategies to lessen the effects and to ensure that there's no life disruptions. One thing that I want to mention with about just mental illness in general is life happens. Life happens. If there is a death, as I experienced 2 of them in November, there's going to be almost a resurgence of symptoms. So in November, I dealt a lot with anxiety. The night that I found out that someone died, I called Johnathan because he knows me. He knows me. He'll be able to tell me, okay, all right, what are you doing? I'm doing this, go to bed, take this medicine, whatever. Because he knows me, and that could not have happened if we didn't foster a relationship, a foundation, really, from the very beginning.
Good point.
Absolutely.
Good point. For you, Johnathan, because we've been talking a lot about Tasha's diagnosis, but you too have some anxiety scenarios that you contend with. So how do you navigate your own anxieties in the midst of dealing with Natasha and her disorders as well?
Absolutely. I think once there was a period of time where I discovered who I was, Alkamar, and I began to really internalize my own struggles, and I felt alone. I had nobody to turn to, right? So I turned inward, of course, and turning to God, and understanding that I had to be my own advocate, because strong people typically, where somebody optically thinks someone is strong and has everything together, we have no help. There's no one for the strong. So I had to get myself together, and Natasha came in at the right time in my life, where I was able to give her what I've already learned, that strength, that compassion. But people ask me all the time, how do I do what I do? I am the commissioner, vice mayor of the city, acting mayor of the city of District Heights. the vice chair of the Human Relations Commission. On the 100 Black men in Prince George's County, I'm the leadership development chair for the organization. I mentor kids in my community from 6 until they graduate. So I have a full-time job, you know. And how do I do it? And sometimes I don't even know. There is something that needs to be done, and I do it despite myself, despite what I'm going through and how I feel. I just have to turn inward and gather that energy. Do meditation is a big deal for me. Learning how to properly breathe, 4 seconds in and 4 seconds out, and really get that peace and that peace that I need in order to do all the things that I do. So and I'll talk about it. I don't mind having conversations with people about, you know, I'm going through it, I'm hurting. You know, sometimes as guys, we need somebody to you know, we need a shoulder to cry on too.
Yeah.
We need to have someone to talk to and someone to say it's going to be all right. After all the things we're going through. So this is why me and Natasha think this is a very important conversation, because if we can do it, and we've been through a lot for 7 years, not just for a moment, and we've lasted the storm. So we have to come and have these conversations, and this is why it's important, Alkamar, that we come out here and be so brutally honest.
Yes.
And this is only the half of it, because we haven't talked about the minutia and everything else and the absolute building that we had. But it's so much and it's so layered.
And you said
I
something.
want to answer that question about how you do what you do, because I think we have the same answer, and the answer is purpose. You know, when you have purpose, when you know why you are, when you know why you're doing what you're doing, that it's for greater good. Like this interview, you know, we're both very, very private. We are unapologetically private. And so if we're sharing anything about our lives and our journey, it is for the greater good. But purpose is what fuels me. And I know that it's what fuels Johnathan. We're very on brand, you know, for ourselves. Everything that we do is consistent with who we are, our values, our desires, our destiny, our purpose. And if, you know, I've always said, anytime that I'm, you know, depressed, give me an assignment. Give me something to do, because it pulls me out of my head and it reminds me of, okay, there is a greater work to be done.
Absolutely.
So sometimes when you're feeling bad, when you're feeling low, when you're dealing with anxiety and depression, what gets you out of that headspace is purpose. Remembering who you are, why you do what you do, and why you must press on. So for, you know, when I mention suicidal thoughts, people always say, well, how is that possible, Natasha? You're doing so much. There's a difference between being suicidal and having suicidal thoughts. And the way that I explain it is, when you're in a relationship, when you get married, you do not stop noticing other good-looking people. The difference is you're not acting on it.
Okay.
And so when it comes to mental health and mental illness, you may still have that suicidal thought, but you're not acting on it because you recognize that you made a commitment to your spouse, or in this case, you made a commitment to live and to fulfill your purpose, and so that's no longer an option.
Natasha, really quick, do you remember when I said to you in the conversation, before I say I do, I want to say I did? And what that means is, before I take you away from your home or marry you, I want to say I've actually done the work that is supposed to be done with this relationship. I wanted to learn all about you, understand your nuances, the good, bad, and the indifferent. And I think that people who can't say that they did the work can't say I do to anybody that they're in a relationship with. So, because it takes more than just wanting or having the desire to do a thing, but what work have you put in to get it done? How it almost goes back to wooing somebody. You have to put in time, work, and energy. You can't just have it because it looks good to you. And I think with us, even though you looked good to me, but I had to go deeper and to understand who you were, because I committed myself to you at that particular point in time.
That sounds like...
Well, that's really the truth about relationships, because many people enter relationships and get married and they're there for the better, the richer, and the health. But the other side of the relationship is sometimes you may have to deal with the worst the poor, and sickness. And can you handle that? Before you say I do, can you say I did? Can you say that you supported someone through the absolute worst time of their life, whether that's finances or health or just job loss circumstances? Can you say that? And many people, in my opinion, can't, and that's okay. But figure that out before you get in the relationship. Figure that out before you get married, because there are people who are dying. This is serious for me. You wake me up at 3 in the morning, I'm going to be saying the same thing. This is serious. This is a big deal. People are dying because they're losing hope, because they don't have people that for real support them. And so this conversation today is about what we did right. What we did right was we established a foundation that was based on mutual respect, mutual love, and trust. And here we are.
Yeah.
We navigated, really tough times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
This is like the opposite of what we're told. It's
Yeah.
sort of like
Yeah.
you guys are saying let's get through the rough patches now, and most people wait until they're married to say, well, we're gonna weather the storm when we're married. But you bring up a really good point, because it sounds like you're studying her. It's almost like you went to school and you majored in Natasha, right?
And I made straight A's. And I made straight A's. And we have to understand too, for those who are in a sense caretakers of those who have mental health issues, it's not necessarily easy, but it's worth it. I think if we look at the worth of a thing, then we tend to not abuse it, and we take advantage. We take a full advantage of that opportunity to be in the presence of. So we went through a lot, but it was for a particular reason, and I was. We had to have met, even to have this conversation, because so many people need to hear it, and especially us Black people, we need to have that conversation daily. And it's more than just the physical love, because our physical love has transcended into this, and we can go as deep as we need to, but we're gonna. In the 1 hour we don't have the time, but. We're going to continue this conversation, though, so people can know.
Yeah, because I wanted to go back to something you said early on, where you said that you discussing this didn't diminish your strength.
No.
You're still all of those things, those accolades, noteworthy things that make you who you are.
Absolutely.
And now here you are talking about this, where so many of us hide in the shadows with our mental illness and don't want people to know and don't want to share. And I'm wondering how is that beneficial to them when they do that versus what you're doing right now with being open and sharing and allowing other people to be comfortable based on your sharing.
I've done it. I've done it. I'm doing it now. I'm sharing my story. I'm telling people, not because it's popular, because it's necessary. I think that is the biggest thing. It's necessary, and I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I'm not afraid of how it's going to affect my image or how it's going to affect my life or lifestyle. I dictate that at the end of the day. But because of my purpose in life, because of what I've been called to do, and to build with my people, I cannot be silent, because I think silence is derelict of duties. If I say nothing, then I'm not doing my job. And I want everybody, all of my people, everybody to be open, to be saved. So we're going through so much. There's so much tragedy. There's so much happening in the world. And if I choose to say nothing and choose to be silent, Alkamar, what's going to happen? If not us, then who?
Exactly.
And if not when, then now, then when? So we have to really. I'm so serious about it. And I put my life on this. And I want to continue to spread this word, so people can say, you know what, if he can do it, I can do it also. And whoever that is, I'm willing to listen. When people say, ask people how you doing, they say, well, I ain't gonna complain. I'm not gonna complain because nobody's gonna listen anyway. Well, it's time to start listening. Yeah. I'm here to listen.
I have so. I know we're going to talk about the book briefly in a little while, but I wanted you guys to just kind of, both you and Natasha, if you guys can offer people maybe some steps, some solutions for people who may be listening and individually dealing with what could be mental health challenges, or people who are in relationships and they may see something might be off with the person or just with themselves, and they just don't really have the vocabulary.
Absolutely.
So if you guys could just offer some steps towards getting where you guys are at actually right now, because I know you say it's been like a long,
it's a long
tumultuous,
journey.
Journey at times.
I'll start really quick, Natasha. One of the things when we talk about when you are going into crises, sometimes there's a word, and you know the word, that when you forget, right? We say when the Wi-Fi is off. And then I have to come back to Natasha. Remember. Do you remember this? This is why one of the things we did is had Natasha write stuff down. When she had trying moments, she wrote it down. Because when she went to that point of crises where the Wi-Fi was off, she didn't remember. So I had to, in a sense, start back over, or have her remember, look at this to remember that. Then it all came back. Natasha?
I hope you don't mind me sharing, Johnathan. I can't see you, so I'm going to say it anyway.
No, you're good.
There was a little bit of foreshadowing, I think, with our relationship, because Johnathan gave me a DVD maybe a week or two after we met. And it was for a movie that I had never seen, and it was The Notebook. And The Notebook, there is a scene toward the end where the man is basically reliving a story every single day for his wife that doesn't remember. And we've spoken about it since then, that it was foreshadowing. One of the challenges with a mood disorder and with any mental illness is not being able to trust your own mind, not being able to gauge what is true and what is not. And so I would lean on Johnathan for that, lean on Johnathan for, okay, what is normal? What is not normal? How do I even navigate this world? I know that I'm capable when I'm doing things for you, but just on a day-to-day, it's challenging for me. And so there was some foreshadowing with that, and he would tell me every day, remember. And sometimes I did if it was written down, but other times, it was really, really challenging for me to remember. And that's just part of the diagnosis. That's just part of the journey. So when it comes to strategy, I saw an episode of Red Table Talk with Jada Pinkett, and she said that there is an intimacy that transcends sex. And many people believe that the highest form of intimacy in a relationship is when there is sexual intimacy, and that's not true. There are many times, I don't even know how many times, when I'm having a panic attack and Johnathan would call me, when we were together or not, or a text would come through. If there is any advice that I would give to anyone getting into a relationship, is you need to foster that level of intimacy first, because that's the one that's going to save your life. That's the one that's going to pull you back from the edge. That's really the one that you need. And if you go into it just physicality first, you're going to be missing out on some major things. The reason why we're able to have the relationship that we do now is because we started well. We started correctly, and we've been able to not only have a mutually beneficial, but a mutually supportive relationship. So foundation is important, and then you have to become a subject matter expert on whatever the diagnosis is. The individual with the diagnosis and the person who wants to be in their life. And then the last thing I'd say is personal responsibility. It is, no matter what I was going through, and again, we didn't do everything correctly, but we did a lot of things right. Personal responsibility says that even on my bad day, I can't take it out on him. I can't, have my tantrums and, my frustrations with my life and my diagnosis and take it out on him. Personal responsibility says that I need to learn coping skills for myself. I need to learn how to self-regulate. I need to employ strategy to manage my symptoms, my mood, write things down so I remember, set obnoxious ringtones so I would remember to take medicine, which was a huge issue for us. And that's part of the mental health journey, is forgetting to take medicine, getting to a place where you feel so great that it's like, I don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I don't need this anymore, but he's seeing how my behavior is changing. And I'll let Jonathan.
Or Natasha, or I tell you, pay attention to the phases of the moon. Remember? Pay attention to the phases of the moon, because the moon pulls on us, pulls on our emotions, and there's something to a full moon. There's something to having that, make that psychological thing more pronounced. So even stuff like that, what did you eat today? That thing could cause particular things to happen. So it was a massive journey, and like I said, seeing both sides. And for those, and Natasha deals with a lot of veterans who have PTSD and depression and all other things. And we said that PT can also, it's physical training, but it's also physical touch or pushing through. We need to have PT. We need to push through whatever situation that is. And I think by us seeing the long of it all, where the end point is, that keeps us moving. So for those who are in a thing, there is an ending. An ending is not death. An ending is not giving up. It is not focusing on those things that you're dealing with now, but focusing on those things that will be, in a sense, if that makes sense. So we want to, focus on those things. If you have someone who supports you, as a caretaker, in a sense, with the mental health, it is extremely difficult at times. But the core of things, I knew Natasha loved me. No matter how harsh she came across sometime, in her conversations to me, when she was in a particular mode, how she said she hated me, or how she didn't want to be around me, or this, that, and the other. But I knew it wasn't her speaking. And when we talk about diagnosis of bipolar, we're talking about a duality. We're talking about the two poles. It's two people can occupy one body. And when I say this, it's the diagnoses and the person. And you can't separate these two. I mean, Natasha had some questions about whether we can separate the bipolar from the person. But at the end of the day, I love both of them, and which kept me there.
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like not taking it personal.
Not
is
taking
a
it personal.
big piece of this, because I'm listening and like you had to really tell your and that goes to really getting to knowing the person and being in tune with them, so that you could be able to say, no, this ain't you.
No.
Well, this is you, but this is that side of you happening right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know what? As far as another strategy for people who are living with a mental illness, I've told this to all of my clients, the women who have a diagnosis, is you need two apps. Johnathan mentioned one, the moon. You need to know when there's going to be a full moon. I don't know why, but if you ask anyone in law enforcement or the medical profession, they know that hospitals are filled on the full moon. And then the other one is a menstrual cycle tracker. And we're transparent here. You need to know when your cycle is starting. At the risk of making him blush, Johnathan would know when my cycle was coming because my mood would change. And so sometimes when you have a diagnosis, you have to recognize that it's not always that you need to change your medicine or the medicine isn't working. It could just be hormones. It could just be that time of the month. It could just be that the moon there's about to be a full moon. And so now again, this is where the personal responsibility comes in. So I know that near the full moon, and it's going to be tomorrow, I believe, less than 24 hours, I know that I'm more irritable. I am more likely to be irritated by someone popping gum, clicking a pen, And so this isn't the day for me to work from Panera, because I'm going to hear everyone chew. And when I'm more irritated, when I'm near that 6, 7, 8, my hearing is, everything is amplified for me. So I hear everything seemingly at a level 10. And that means, okay, Natasha, work from home or work from, a quiet office. And so that's the personal responsibility. I can't expect the world to chew quietly and to not click a pen and to, walk silently, simply because I'm irritated. I have to make sure that I'm taking care of that for myself.
I love it.
Right.
Really good
Yes.
advice. Really good advice. It sounds to me like medication is not enough. I'm thinking of all of those who have illnesses, even outside of the ones we're discussing today, that take medication and that's it. So you want to add to that, how important is it to do more than just take a pill for the issues?
He
you're
mentioned
dealing with?
yoga in the beginning too, which helped.
So here's the issue.
Meditation, sorry.
Many people think that when you take medication that it's like Red Bull, you're supposed to have wings and life gets, wonderful
That
after
is
that.
true.
That's not the case, especially when you're dealing with trauma. Personally, I do not think trauma in and of itself is a mental illness. I think it's a human response to something traumatic. As of right now, there's no medicine on the market that can erase your memory. If you have experienced trauma through war, trauma through a rape, a car accident, a plane crash, that's a memory that you have to process, that you have to go through. The only thing that a medicine can do is to lessen the symptoms. If there's some anxiety or depression, it lessens the symptoms so you can get to a place where you can actually do the real work of processing the trauma. Now, when it comes to a mood disorder, last month was tough for me. Medicine or not, when someone dies, you're going to experience grief. And so I had to lean on Johnathan to ask, like, okay, well, what's normal? Because I haven't been here before. Am I supposed to be feeling like this? Am I supposed to be having trouble sleeping? One, because he knows me. Two, because he's been through it. Medicine is not enough. And depending on what medicine you're taking and how long this journey is for you, you're going to have to switch between medicines because it loses its efficacy. I've been in my life on more than 15 different types of medicine because they lose their potency, their efficacy, they stop working, which also speaks to support, because in the last 7 years, every time I took a new medicine, I was talking to Johnathan about it.
And I was researching.
He's looking it up. He's saying, so I'll let you say that.
No, absolutely. Researching it, finding out what if it's good or bad, if it's going to counteract to one medication or the other that you're taking. If it is, did the doctor tell you that? Didn't, stop taking it. When things like that happen, sometimes drugs can have the opposite effect, and they could be the wrong thing to do. At that particular point in time, because these doctors sometimes pushing medicine out. And I remember when, going through a panic attack, and I was dealing with panic attacks and anxiety attacks for like a year and a half every day.
Wow.
Every day, people. And I had to be normal. I had to go to work, I had to do presentations, I had to be around people and smile, I had to do everything the way I do it, having an anxiety attack as I spoke. And so at a certain point in time, I'm like, okay, I need something to curb this.
Yeah.
So getting something to curb that so I can normalize, then figure it out.
Okay.
So from that point, I normalized myself, then I figured it out. And once I figured it out, and I took some ownership, understanding, and being patient with me. So, okay, something's going on, Medlock, you're not responsible for it, but it's your responsibility to get out of it. So doing that, learning how to cope, and it took years now. And then I could wane myself off. If I needed something else to sleep or whatever, that's better than having constant anxiety, constant depression, and constant, and anxiety and sorts. So we have to be patient with ourselves. We have to have those who are on our side to advocate for us. Somebody to listen. Somebody And I think this is why, Natasha, we're having this conversation, because we're saying if we have somebody who supports us, we can get through it. And we have so many people committing suicide because they feel so alone, that they have no one else, no one is paying attention. But we're here to say that there can be somebody. It doesn't have to be several hundred people, several people. It can be that strong one that keeps us moving and keeps us living. Because there are a few times where Natasha could not have been here if I wasn't there to support, and I wasn't there for her to hear my voice at that time. So we're saving lives through this conversation.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we talk about. Have somebody that honors your life by being there.
Okay. We got a few minutes left, and we definitely want to get to the book. But I just want you to share with people what that looks like. What does going through a panic attack? Share with us somebody who may not understand what that.
Oh my God!
How that feels.
Panic attack is waking up. For instance, I was woken out of my sleep with a panic attack, and your heart's racing. I mean, 1,000 miles per hour, just almost about to pound out of your chest. You're cold sweat immediately all over your body. Eyes as big as saucers. Your heart races and it stops. You think it stops. You feel you're constantly feeling your pulse and making sure you're still alive. You think you will absolutely die in that moment. You're about to die. It's a panic attack. It's fight, flight, or what is it? The last one, Natasha?
Freeze.
Or freeze. But typically in that moment, you want to find a corner and just hide in, because your mind is going 1,000 miles per hour, and you literally believe you're about to die. Literally.
What triggers it?
Oh God.
Everything and nothing.
Everything and nothing at all.
Right.
But it starts off, Natasha, with something traumatic going on, and you hold it in for so long. So we deal with traumatic experiences daily, and we hold it in, and it manifests itself in anxiety and panic.
Yeah.
Because we suppress those things, and it festers and becomes toxic, and our body has to react.
Wow.
So it wakes us up, or it stirs us up. And I think for me, it lets us know that you're on the verge, of dying if you don't do something. So your body shakes you up and then wakes you up, right? But yeah, panic attacks
This is
are
a panic
absolute
attack.
death.
Okay.
Absolute death.
Mm-hmm.
Impending death. Am I correct, Natasha?
Yeah, I think for me, the panic attack is a feeling like you're having a stroke, a heart attack, and an asthma attack all at the same time. It is the worst ones to have are at night when you're asleep, because you wake up with the dread. It's like having your back against the wall and there's a Mack truck speeding towards you, but there's walls on both sides and there is no escape. So in that moment you feel like you're about to die. And so from a clinical perspective, let me explain it like this, because I heard Julie Alvarado, who's amazing when it comes to speaking about trauma. We have three main parts of the brain. The amygdala is the animalistic part of the brain. This is the fight, flight, or freeze. That's it. We behave like an animal in that moment. It's survival, it's me or you. We've got the hippocampus, which is the cause and effect. If I do this, then this will happen. If I say this, then this will happen. And then we've got the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive functioning and our reasoning. What happens during an anxiety attack is there's no Wi-Fi. We're offline. So the executive functioning and the cause and effect part of the brain is offline. Even if you wanted to connect, you couldn't connect. So your only response is fight, flight, or freeze. And so in that moment, you're feeling absolute dread. It's like, 1,000 pit bulls are chasing you and they're right at your heels. And even if for everyone else around, there's no danger. Even if everyone can see that you're fine, you're not drowning, you're not dying, for you, it feels like you are about to die.
Absolutely.
And I think, Johnathan, you might agree with me, during the day, you can deal with an anxiety attack because you can ground, you can recognize that there's nothing happening, you're not physically in any danger, even if the symptoms are happening. But when you wake up at night, in the midst of a panic attack. That's a whole other level. And it's not, listen, no one's going to ask for that. No one wants to deal with that. So anyone who's dealing with anxiety and with panic attacks, understand that no one is signing up for that kind of life. It's something that we just have to work through.
Have to work through that, exactly.
Wow.
My last question, and then I know that I know, was, okay, so just like how you were saying that you can remember as early as 9 years old, and I'm sure you probably can remember a time that you didn't have this particular like anxiety or anything like that. Is there an undoing? Is that possible?
Good question.
Oh,
Does someone have to live with this for the rest of their lives, or is there some sort of healing, quote unquote healing, that can happen?
Oh, I can speak to the anxiety and panic side, and the answer is absolutely yes.
And in 30 seconds each, please.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Talk about the book.
absolutely, the anxiety and panic attacks, absolutely, they can be eradicated and undid. But it's a perspective. You have to change your life and your perspective. I think once I stopped believing the hype of everybody else and stopped trying to live everybody else's life and be under the pressures of things and stuff and whatever, and I started living my own individual life, the pressure became less. You know, even for my two sons, and for, you know, live your life. You know, do that thing for you. So I think when we start to be selfing, giving back to self a lot more than the expectations of others, because pressures is so real. The pressure is so real to live for others. But when we reverse that and change and begin to live for ourselves, as I've done, and I'm the most giving person in the world, but I've also give back to me, where it's no pressure for me at that time, and I begin to heal. And I haven't had a panic attack in 9 years.
Oh wow!
All
Okay.
right, a little anxiety here and there,
Yeah.
but I get myself back.
Okay. Natasha?
Yes. Is it possible? Bipolar disorder, I can tell you that there's times when it's going to feel like you are in remission. There are many times in my life that I felt like, I'm healed, and of course that leads to me stopping the medicine. There are times when I do not need as much medicine, but I am aware that I should not overestimate my strengths or underestimate my weaknesses. I have safeguards in place, not just people, but alarms and apps to ensure that I'm always aware of where I am, because I recognize that sometimes I don't remember. And for me, I've just done too much in my life, and I'm in a place that I love and enjoy, that risking losing it all, harming relationships, it's not worth me thinking and wanting to test whether or not I am past and beyond where I am. Again, November, I was very symptomatic, great things happening, but also I was having panic attacks and depression and cycling and a lot of those things. But because I had the safeguards in place, because I had, people to talk to, because I had apps that reminded me of the full moon and cycles, it worked out. We were able to navigate it successfully.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, we are out of time, but this can go on forever.
Yeah.
But before we go, we definitely want to get out there information relating to your book, Natasha. Can you share with us in a smidget how they can find your book?
A quick snippet, and I gotta plug Johnathan. This was a project that was birthed from Johnathan giving me a challenge, October 2017. I was whining about people not supporting me, and what he did was he suspended everything that he was doing besides his job to work with me on writing this book. It's Provoking Thoughts, 101 Inspirational Quotes for Daily Life. They are 101 divine downloads from God to me that I have about 5,000 maybe on my computer, and Johnathan and I went through and we selected 101. It's on Amazon. You can look it up by its name, or you could look it up by my name, Natasha A. Pierre. And it is the demonstration of support. It's what support looks like.
Ashe.
Thank you.
We thank both of you guys
Yes.
for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and share with the community about, the impact of mental health on our relationships. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And can I let people know, if they have any conversation or any questions, go to duoanddiagnoses@gmail.com. Submit your questions, and we'll be more than happy to answer them within 48 hours.
Repeat that.
It's duo, DUO, and ANDDIAGNOSIS @gmail.com. And that email will come to both Natasha and I, and we will answer any questions that we haven't been able to answer now. But we have so much more conversations to have, and look for us to be on some platform in the very near future.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you, family, and get the information out there, please. That's why Hanif and I do what we do, because it serves no purpose for this conversation to stay in this room. You guys hold the power to get that information out to as many people as possible, and it could very well save somebody's life.
Definitely beneficial.
Yeah. So until next week, take care of each other, family. Peace.
Thank you so much. Peace.